Okay, so while I was off gallivanting all across Pasco County because taking Grandma to her eye doctor and everything yesterday, I decided to reread TJ's book, Coming to Power, to kind of showcase what elements he uses that drew me in. Even if initially he had a protagonist that it's like, oh, he has this particular kind of background, you know, possibly like a redemption arc thing, which a lot of people, I don't think, do the redemption stuff uh, enough to, basically interest my wheelhouse preferences. But in this case, with John, there's something very vital that TJ gets right. John has a very clear idea of what is truly good and what is truly evil, and even though he murdered the cop in self-defense for killing his friend, he knew fundamentally that was a wrong thing to do. Like the whole idea of two wrongs don't make a right and that sort of thing. His protagonist very much realizes what he did was fundamentally wrong. And a lot of people nowadays, when I'm like talking about the moral gray soup aspect and everything else, they go by degrees of, well, this is acceptable because of X, Y, and Z, and I'm gonna be able to basically rationalize why I did this. And John doesn't rationalize it. He knows it's fundamentally wrong, and you know, he knows right from wrong. Uh, he doesn't use the nihilism to, basically reassure himself. He sees himself as a murderer. And then, that's when you're pulled into the whole trip to another world kind of setup, akin to Barsoom and everything. The hero is transplanted somewhere else where magic and other things are a fundamental part of someone's existence. And even the way he is transported, the light does genuinely give him a choice if he wants to leave his world behind and explore this new one. And even it says that eventually, he'll be able to absolve himself of his origin of murder. But it's not like absolution or absolution because he was able to rationalize it away. Like, no, it's genuinely seeking a more kind of transformation, maybe even biblical in a sense, and he'll basically have to journey through this new world to discover, like, okay, how can I truly redeem myself? It's kind of like getting a second chance, but from the bedrock that this character has, moral foundations in terms of, like, yes, I'm going to just keep repeating it because a lot of characters do not reflect this. He knows right from wrong. Like, it's wrong to steal, it's wrong to murder. Yeah, he doesn't justify it. He doesn't try to whitewash his own past in a way. And that's also what I feel Xena gets correct, in that show. Xena doesn't try to whitewash her own past. She knows absolute right from wrong. And she's seeking to atone for that. A lot of modern stuff basically is the various slippery slope of, well, if X, Y, or Z, happens, I have to justify it to myself, like, oh, it was in the name of survival, that sort of thing. It's the reason why Mr. Matt's comment about, where, here, let me pull it up so I remember quoting this correctly. Okay, here we go, I found it. Because I replied to him, like, I wonder if this is why Babylon 5 works so well. Then again, I see the setting as more positive than negative in comparison to, the Goths or the Expanses. And Matt was saying, well understood principles are black and white. Well understood situations are gray. If your principles go gray, your principles have devolved into emotions, hate, fear, love, etc. Which I do see that as a fundamental way of how I view even my entertainment. Yes, can you have situations that are more ambiguous? Sure. But even in the case of Babylon 5, a lot of the characters know the fundamental difference between good and evil, and they act accordingly. Um, and, sometimes I get pushback on this view that I have because some might see my point of view as more childish, or it's like, why don't you change your point of view to reflect more of the real world, or like clown world? And it's like, no, I rather continue to go through life seeing things as more the glass is half full rather than wallowing in the dirt in misery. If that makes me childish, then oh well. I rather look up in the sky and wonder, like I've said before. And TJ's book lets you do that. You look up into the night sky and you get to see a world filled with wonder. John gets a second chance at doing things and actually, having a more fulfilling life in this world than he did in the last one. Because the last one, he was just coasting by and he didn't really have much drive or a purpose. And this book helps showcase, like, no matter what kind of mindset you have, people need a purpose, which writing gives me a purpose. That's why I'm writing aspirational and finding the superversive, and why I enjoy TJ's books. He understands this. A lot of modern stuff loves to deconstruct, but they don't know how to rebuild things. Babylon 5, yeah, deconstructs some things, but Babylon 5 also rebuilds things too. Straczynski knows to put in light and dark. He doesn't go willy-nilly to one side or the other. He tries to do a balance, but when I first watched Babylon 5 when I was like 11, I was mostly picking up on the ideas of brotherhood, standing by your friends, and trying to bring people to a better understanding of things, maybe even through words or a more peaceful manner. Is it always possible? No, but I rather listen to the better part of my heart if I can. I know I don't always succeed, and friendships and everything else have dissolved because of it, because you just can't come to a true understanding. I mean, it's gonna happen. It's the reason why I've joined a couple of superversive discords, so that way I can bounce ideas off of people that see things more from my wheelhouse point of view. And again, it's important to have those different points of view so you can basically compare and contrast. But far too often, and I know I'm also a part of this too, I want to try to convince people of more of my mode of thinking, because everything in popular culture and media right now is so gravitated towards, the glass half empty, everything sucks, everything's dystopic. Because it just reminds me that the pulps, were birthed from the most egregious times in some ways, where everything around them, their whole world around them could be dark and dreary, and like they don't know, like it's with the Depression, they didn't know where the next meal would come from, and that sort of thing. So a lot of the escapist factor for a lot of older pulps was to give some people something to cheer about. But nowadays, even though clown world is the way it is, a lot of entertainment feeds into that. It feeds into the postmodern, the nihilism, the gray goop morality. And it's like, eventually, when you break down things so much, what is there to aspire to? Yeah, we can't get to the level of Superman or Clark Kent. We can try. And you can see that in everyday little actions of people, like an example in Texas, where they shoved all the money under the door after taking the water that they needed. They gave that store over $600. I imagine that more than enough covered for all that water that they had to, basically purchase. It's like little acts of human decency like that that still I find very refreshing. And with TJ's books, you'll find, you know, acts of decency that are missing in a lot of modern stories. Um, a lot of a lot of the people on the island, they are more baseline Clark Kent. There's a few bad eggs to showcase how the necromantic magic works, but they eventually, like, I'm only just spoiling a little bit from the first few chapters, but eventually they nominate their head healer, their doctor, who uses, he has a sensor that does advanced tech analysis on a person's, systems, where it's like, okay, do they have any heart problems and everything else like that. So that's this kind of the science fantasy part of it, where this world does have very advanced tech, but it has been lost to some people. And the way he describes some of the magic, it almost appears to be like kind of like she's able to use kind of like holograms to project out things to be able to see distant places. It's really interesting. I would say if you like the mix of science fiction and fantasy, or science fiction in, with a bit of magic, you'll be right at home with this series. And hopefully he'll get to the rest of them soon, because yeah, I'm definitely invested. It gives me, a lot of times the very simple setups are what works the best for me. Again, some people have said that that's too childlike, but in today's day and age, just having something that's straightforward and just a simple binary is refreshing. I don't need everything to be like a Calvinistic motivational hero setup, or anti-hero setup, or villain setup, because that really is a dime a dozen nowadays. It's everywhere. And I get it, a lot of people really do enjoy that, but that's the reason why on my channel, like a majority of the time, I try to focus on things I enjoy. And yes, I will lash out and do compare and contrast of like what I really hate about certain popular trends and movements. But, it's just human. People will lash out, and I do my best not to actually attack fans of, say, the Snyder type stuff and everything else. And I'll go back to, like, okay, what is the superversive book movement doing today? And I know I've been a little bit behind that on the channel, just because it's like writing takes up 90% of my free time. So that's the reason why on days off I try to record a little bit of stuff like I'm doing now to put up on the channel for later. But yeah, overall, Coming to Power isn't just about the hero gaining a bunch of wondrous abilities. It's how you use those powers that's important. And you get to see John through the eyes of one of the natives that's there initially. And she sees his whole entire existence when she initially meets him, that he seems to be like very innocent and looking at things with like a kind of wide-eyed wonder that she hasn't seen in a little while. And he felt compelled to tell her, like, yeah, in my original world, I murdered someone. So it's basically a refreshing take on something that is old as time with the hero's journey, especially in light of what modern trends basically aim at for people. When I think of humanized characters, I don't think of somebody that's like well-rounded or anything else like that. To me, humanized characters are just flawed fuck-ups that keep dragging people into the dirt. Eventually, you won't have something to aspire to. Eventually, all those heroic archetypes are going to be just like us and just toiling about their day, just basically living one more day and then living another day, but inside, you're pretty much dead. I don't want a life like that. A life like that, to me, is pure misery. So, I guess just to cap it off, Coming to Power has that sense of wonder that I've been missing in books. So that's why it makes the superversive list today. So, have a good day, everybody.